There are moments, often unnoticed, when you say something, do something, or even think something, and it changes everything, not because of magic, not because the universe punished you, but because the deepest layers of your psyche responded, and in that response, something in the cosmos shifted with it. You were chosen, yes, but that doesn't mean untouchable. Being chosen means you are under watch, not by others, but by your own soul. And the last thing you did, it mattered. Maybe you acted out of fear, maybe you broke a promise to yourself, maybe you stayed silent when you should have spoken, or maybe you walked away from the very thing that was sent to awaken you. What you did rerouted the sacred path that was laid out for you, because the divine doesn't enforce destiny. It collaborates with consciousness, and your consciousness, it either creates harmony with your calling or chaos against it. Many people believe fate is final, that there is a script written in stone, a holy plan that cannot be shaken. That is a lie. The plan bends with your awareness, it adjusts to your courage, it mirrors your will. And what's dangerous is this: some of you are walking with the illusion that you're still on track, but the map you're holding is outdated. The last act you took, maybe in haste, maybe in pain, sent you down a road that wasn't yours. You didn't ruin your life, but you did awaken a new version of it. Now the question becomes, can you face the unconscious forces that made you act that way? Can you take radical responsibility for the turn you took? Because this is not a punishment, this is a call. You are not broken, you are not disqualified, but you are being asked to see the truth, that your power was never just in being chosen. Your power is in choosing again, with more awareness. What you did changed God's plan, but what you do next can realign it. So ask yourself, what inside you is afraid of your own light? What in your past still haunts your present decisions? What are you pretending not to know? The plan can still unfold, but only if you meet it with your full self, not the self shaped by fear, but the one shaped by truth. You weren't just chosen to shine. Most people believe they are in control of their lives because they make conscious decisions. They think, I chose this, or I decided that, as if the visible part of the mind is the full author of their fate. But that's an illusion. The truth is far more complex and far more powerful. Your unconscious mind, not your surface-level thoughts, holds the true story of who you are and where you are headed. Think of the human mind like an iceberg. The conscious mind is the small tip above water. What you know, what you say, what you think you believe. But beneath the surface lies a vast submerged world, unprocessed experiences, ancestral patterns, hidden desires, and buried fears. And it is from this deep reservoir that most of your actions are born. You may tell yourself you made a logical decision to quit the job, to stay in the relationship, to lie, to run, to fight. But often, it was the unconscious mind that made the move before the conscious mind caught up. You simply rationalized it afterward. Let's take an example. A man walks away from a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He says it wasn't the right time. He says he had other priorities, but deep down he knows the truth. A voice whispered inside him that he wasn't good enough. That voice wasn't logical. It was emotional, ancient, and buried. It may have come from childhood shame, from generational trauma, or from a belief implanted by someone who betrayed him. And without realizing it, he obeyed that voice. Now, here's where the truth gets difficult, but liberating. That one moment, that one unconscious decision, has consequences. It doesn't just change his career, it changes the path of his life. Because every step taken from fear, shame, or unawareness leads him further from the version of himself that was meant to emerge. And the same is true for you. What you do consciously matters, yes, but what moves you unconsciously determines your destiny. This is why so many people feel like something is missing. They followed the rules, they made good choices, but they feel disconnected, lost, or burdened by unexplained heaviness. Why? Because they never asked, who is really making my decisions, my true self or the wounded self hiding beneath the surface? Let's go deeper. Every action, no matter how small, carries with it the power of alignment or disalignment. When you act from your authentic self, your inner truth, you walk the road that was made for you. You feel energy, clarity, even synchronicity. But when you act from fear, people, pleasing, ego, or trauma, you unknowingly step off that road. The people you meet, the places you end up, the events that follow, they all change, and so God's plan for you shifts, not as punishment, but as consequence, because here's the spiritual law. What is unconscious becomes your fate. Until you bring light into the shadow, until you look within with brutal honesty, your life will be directed by forces you don't see, and then you will call it destiny. This is why reflection is sacred. Not just meditation or journaling, but deep, piercing inner work. You must become aware of the unconscious beliefs that are silently steering your life. What you avoid, what you suppress, what you deny. These things rule you far more than the words you speak or the promises you make. The unconscious holds the real story. You may think you're in control, but if you've never explored your shadow, your past, your trauma, or your inner voice, then you're only guessing. You may even think God has abandoned you or fate is against you, but in truth, you're just living out a pattern that hasn't yet been healed, and once you realize this, you're no longer a victim. You become responsible. You awaken, and when you awaken, you begin to rewrite the script, not just of your past, but of your future. God's plan for you is not lost, it's waiting, but it requires you to do one brave thing: turn within. Face what's there, then act, not from fear, but from truth. That's when the path realigns. That's when the chosen one remembers who they are. Every human life walks a tightrope between two powerful forces: the belief in a preordained destiny and the experience of free will. At first glance, these seem like opposites. If destiny is written, then what power do your choices have? But if free will is absolute, then what meaning is there in a higher plan? This is the conflict, and it lives inside you every day. Let's begin by clearing a common illusion. You are not a puppet of fate. You are also not the sole architect of your life. The truth is far more mysterious. You are a co-creator. There is a plan, yes, but it is not fixed like concrete. It's fluid like a river. It bends, swells, and sometimes floods based on your consciousness. Think of your life as a map. Destiny gives you the terrain, the coordinates, and the calling. But free will chooses the vehicle, the speed, the stops, and the direction. Together they dance, and it is this dance that shapes your reality. Now, here's where it gets personal. Most people don't know when they've stepped out of the dance. They believe they're still aligned with their purpose, when in fact, a quiet choice made from fear, resentment, or distraction has silently rerouted them. And they don't feel it until years later, when confusion, disconnection, or regret begins to surface. This is the inner conflict. You are wired for a divine path, but also burdened with the freedom to betray it. So how do you know when you're out of alignment? You feel stuck. You repeat the same emotional cycles. You attract the same relationships or crises. You sabotage things before they bloom. You avoid stillness because silence confronts you with truth. These are not signs of bad luck. These are the echoes of choices that violated your deeper knowing. And once you do, that once you betray your authentic self, even subtly, destiny adapts, not out of cruelty, but because the plan must respond to the new you that your choice just created. Let's take an example. Imagine a woman destined to become a healer, a guide, someone whose voice helps others wake up. She knows this deep inside, but it terrifies her. One day, she chooses comfort over calling. She marries someone who silences her voice. She takes a job that numbs her soul. She tells herself it's practical, safe, the right thing to do. But each of these choices, made in free will, reshapes the path she was meant to walk. Did she ruin her destiny? No, but she altered the route, and with each step away from her inner truth, the conflict grows. Her spirit feels heavier. Life becomes a maze, not a mission. This is the cost of unconscious free will. But here's the beauty: the moment you realize it, you can begin to return. You see, the universe, call it God, the psyche, or something else, is not static. It listens, it feels, it responds, and it always leaves space for correction. So when you finally say, I made that decision from fear, I betrayed myself, I ignored what I knew deep down, you don't lose power, you gain it, because this level of self-awareness is what bridges the gap between your free will and your divine path. Now your choices become sacred again. You start choosing the hard truth over the easy lie. You speak the thing you've buried for years. You stop asking, is this what others expect? And start asking, is this what my soul needs? And with each of those steps, you realign the dance. Destiny, like a current, begins to pull you again, not with force but with flow. Opportunities return, peace enters, people show up who feel like home. Why? Because you stopped fighting your deeper self, and that self is the channel through which destiny speaks. So here's what you must understand. Free will is not freedom from consequences. Destiny is not a chain, it's an invitation, and your power lies in marrying the two. Every day you are choosing. Every moment your decisions are either confirming the divine plan or rewriting it. But you are never lost forever. You are simply one courageous act of honesty away from returning to your rightful path. So stop blaming fate. Stop fearing that you've missed your chance. Instead, look at your choices. Look at where they came from and ask yourself, am I choosing from alignment or avoidance? Because once you choose with truth, destiny stops being something that happens to you. Every one of us carries within a hidden side, a part of ourselves we don't like to look at, don't want to admit, and often refuse to acknowledge. It holds our jealousy, fear, insecurity, lust, rage, pride, and pain. This hidden part is what psychology calls the shadow. But here's what most people don't realize. The shadow doesn't stay silent. It acts. And when it acts, it changes everything. You might believe your life is being led by your goals, your prayers, or your plans. But the truth is this. If your shadow is unacknowledged, it's already influencing your decisions, and therefore your destiny. Let's make this real. Have you ever self-sabotaged something good and didn't know why? Have you ever pushed away someone who loved you, or chased someone who treated you like nothing? Have you ever avoided your calling, your dream, your purpose, telling yourself, it's not time? While deep inside you knew it was fear. That wasn't bad luck. That wasn't weakness. That was your shadow making the decision for you. Now understand this. When your shadow drives your choices, you deviate from divine alignment. You move away from the higher path that was prepared for you, the one built for your truth, your strength, your purpose. Because here's the law of life. Divine alignment only recognizes your authentic self. The moment you start acting from pride instead of humility, from ego instead of purpose, from fear instead of love, you are no longer walking the path meant for the you were created to be. You're walking the path that fits your shadow instead. And here's the tragedy. Most people live entire decades thinking they're following God's plan, when in fact, they're following a detour crafted by their unhealed self. The shadow is not evil. It's not out to destroy you. In fact, it's trying to protect you, just in the wrong way. It was formed during pain, betrayal, rejection, trauma. It built armor. It learned to hide. It created defense systems. And those systems now influence your reactions, your relationships, your silence, your anger. But here's the deeper truth. You cannot step into your divine calling while dragging your shadow behind you, unexamined. Because if the Creator made a plan for your life, that plan was not designed for your fear-based self. It was designed for the healed version of you, the version that integrates the shadow and transforms it into wisdom. That is the sacred task of every chosen one, not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it, to bring it into the light, to understand it, to give it language, and then to make choices from clarity, not from the emotional wounds of yesterday. Let's take an example. Imagine a man destined to be a great leader, but inside him lives a shadow made of rejection from childhood, a voice that says you'll never be good enough. So what does he do? He overcompensates. He becomes controlling. He manipulates. He wears masks. He burns out. From the outside he looks powerful, but his power is rooted in fear, not truth. And so the path that was meant to elevate him spiritually becomes a road of emptiness, because his shadow rerouted the plan. This is how sacred destinies are lost, not because the person wasn't chosen, not because God changed his mind, but because the person refused to face the part of them that was still hiding, still hurting, still pretending. But here's the hope. The moment you shine a light on your shadow, everything changes. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop blaming and start healing. You stop running and finally stand in your truth. And when you do this, when your decisions begin to come from a whole, aware, and honest self, you step back into divine alignment, because God's plan for you doesn't require you to be perfect. It requires you to be real. To know yourself deeply, to choose truth over image, to meet your darkness with compassion instead of shame, that is when your steps regain their power, that is when your path becomes clear again. That is when you return, not to the past, but to the version of yourself that destiny was always waiting for. So stop hiding, stop pretending, face the shadow, heal the wound, because every moment you don't, your shadow continues making choices you were meant to make with love. And in doing so, it bends the sacred path that was once meant for your greatness. There's a dangerous misunderstanding about what it means to be chosen. Many people secretly believe that if they are called by something higher, whether you call it God, destiny, purpose, or soul, it somehow means they are immune to failure, protected from collapse, or guaranteed success. That is false. You were chosen, yes, but you are not untouchable. To be chosen is not a prize. It is a responsibility. It means that you have been gifted with potential, with insight, with calling, but it also means that you will be tested, shaped, and even broken in the process of becoming who you are meant to be. And most importantly, being chosen doesn't mean you can't fall. In fact, the more significant your calling, the more subtle and dangerous your temptations will be. Let's get honest. You may have had moments in your life where you felt aligned, where everything clicked, and a deep knowing within whispered, "This is who I am. This is where I'm meant to be." But then, something happened. Maybe it wasn't dramatic. Maybe it was just one silent decision. You stayed when you should have walked away. You spoke words you couldn't take back. You gave up when it got hard. You lied to protect your pride. You ignored your intuition, and just like that, something shifted. The path didn't disappear, but it bent. The doors didn't lock, but they closed, for now. Because with every decision, your actions inform your alignment. Let's make this painfully clear. You can be chosen and still forfeit your path. You can be called and still get lost in comfort. You can be guided by God but misled by your own wounds. Because purpose is not protected by status. It's protected by awareness. Being chosen doesn't make you above correction. It means you'll be held accountable faster and deeper. Why? Because the weight of your influence is heavier. The ripple of your actions reaches further. You're not just walking for yourself. You're carrying others with you, even if you don't see it yet. So when you betray your truth, even in a small moment, you don't just delay your own growth. You disrupt the plan written for others that was connected to you. That's what most people don't understand. Your purpose is not isolated. It's part of a larger symphony. And when you fall out of tune, the entire song suffers. But this isn't about shame. It's about responsibility. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware, because what you do does matter. That one moment of jealousy, that one choice made in fear, that one time you avoided the truth. These aren't minor events. They are signals to your soul that something needs to realign. Let's take a deeper look. A woman may be chosen to awaken others, to guide them out of darkness, to lead with intuition and courage. But one day, she chooses silence when her voice was needed, not because she's evil, not because she failed, but because her wounds were louder than her wisdom. Now she feels disconnected, tired, uninspired. She doesn't know why. Here's why. Her last choice pulled her slightly off her sacred axis. And the longer she stays there, the harder it becomes to hear the divine voice again. But here's the mercy in all of this. The chosen can return, always, but they must first admit they've wandered. They must look at the choice that disconnected them, not with guilt, but with honesty. They must take responsibility for the detour. Only then can the map reorient itself. You see, the plan for your life is living. It breathes with your consciousness, and every time you remember who you are and act from that truth, the path opens again. Not because you're lucky, but because you're willing. You were chosen. But now you must choose yourself, again and again and again. That's the real weight of being chosen. It's not a one-time event. It's a lifetime of choices that must reflect the truth of who you were created to become. So no, you are not untouchable. You can fall, you can lose alignment, you can become your own obstacle, but the moment you take full ownership of that, you rise again, stronger, clearer, aligned, and the plan, God's plan, reshapes around the new, awakened version of you. We often think of transformation as a mountaintop moment, an awakening, a breakthrough, a sudden burst of clarity that pulls us into a new life. But that's the fantasy. The truth is much harder and much more beautiful. Transformation doesn't begin at the peak. It begins at the point of your deepest misstep, the wrong turn, the decision you regret. The relationship you stayed in too long, the opportunity you ignored, the silence you kept when you should have spoken, that's where your transformation actually starts. It's not the success that shapes you. It's what you do after you fall, because that's the moment when your soul is most awake, most alert. That's the moment the illusion breaks, when you realize you betrayed your truth. By action, avoidance, or fear, you are finally standing at the doorway of self-knowledge. And yet most people avoid this doorway. They try to outrun it with distraction. They try to bury it with justification. They numb themselves with entertainment, work, even fake positivity. Anything to avoid facing the place they strayed. But here is the spiritual truth. You cannot become who you are meant to be until you turn around and walk back to where you left yourself. It may have been years ago, or last week. But somewhere back there, you made a choice that split you from your path, and your transformation begins not by forgetting that moment, but by remembering it fully, honestly, painfully, and with love. Let's take an example. A man lives years pretending to be strong, pretending nothing bothers him. He's built a life around status, pride, control, but one night he feels empty. His success tastes like ash. His relationships feel dead. His soul is restless. He doesn't know why. But deep down, he remembers a moment when he shut down his heart, when he ignored the voice of truth, when he chose image over authenticity. That was the wrong turn, and no amount of surface-level success can heal a path built on avoidance. So what does he need to do? Not escape, not blame the world, not seek another distraction. He needs to return to that moment, look it straight in the eye and say, "That was the moment I turned from myself. That's where my transformation begins." You see, this is the difference between change and transformation. Change is external. Transformation is internal. Change says, "I'll get a new job, a new partner, a new city." Transformation says, "I'll face the part of me that made those choices to begin with." And that part, often unconscious, is what actually shapes your life. Because your past doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It lives in your nervous system, in your habits, in your fears, in your resistance. Until it's faced, it runs the show. So when you look back at that wrong turn, don't shame yourself. Don't call it a failure, call it a mirror, because it showed you the exact part of you that still needed healing. Maybe it was your fear of being abandoned. Maybe it was your need to prove yourself. Maybe it was your guilt, your ego, your wounds. Whatever it was, that's the source of your misalignment, and that's where your sacred work begins. This is what real growth demands: courage to return to the place where you betrayed yourself, compassion to face it without judgment, discipline to choose differently, now that you see clearly. When you do this, something incredible happens. The path you thought was lost reappears, not exactly as it was before, but perhaps stronger, wiser, deeper. Because now you're not walking it blindly, you're walking it with self-knowledge, and self-knowledge is what makes you unshakable. God's plan for your life is not fragile. It doesn't disappear the moment you take a wrong step. But it does wait for your awareness to catch up, and that awareness often begins the moment you stop running and say, "This was the moment I turned away, and now I'm ready to return." That is sacred. That is redemption. That is transformation. So stop waiting for a miracle. The miracle is already behind you. At the point you abandoned yourself, go there, not with shame, with reverence, because in the ruins of your wrong turn lies the doorway back to the person you were always meant to become. There's a belief many people carry deep inside that if they make one wrong decision, if they mess up badly enough, they've ruined everything. They think God's plan is like a straight line, fragile, fixed, unchanging. One misstep and it's over, one failure and they're disqualified, but that belief is rooted in fear, not truth. God's plan is not rigid, it's alive, and like all things alive, it can evolve, it can adapt, it can respond to you. In reality, your destiny is not written in stone, it's written in relationship. It's not a script you're forced to follow. It's a conversation between your soul and the divine. That conversation happens in every decision you make. Every moment of truth or denial, every act of courage or avoidance, every time you choose love over fear or fear over love, And here is the most empowering truth of all. God's plan is co-created between what is already waiting for you and what you choose to become. That means your choices matter. They are not meaningless, but it also means you are never beyond redemption. No matter how far you've strayed, no matter what you've lost, no matter how long you've been asleep, you can co-create a new path right from where you are now. Let's go deeper. Some people live trapped in regret, replaying a decision from 5, 10, 20 years ago. They believe the path they were meant to walk is now closed. But in truth, it's not the past that's holding them back. It's their belief that God no longer wants to build anything with them. That belief keeps them stuck, small, silent, but it is a lie. You see, the divine doesn't stop working just because you made a mistake. The divine waits, listens, and watches for your awareness, because awareness is the spark that reactivates the co-creation. The moment you say, I see what I did, I see who I became, and I'm ready to return to truth, the plan breathes again, not as it was, but as it must now become, based on who you are today, because even your detour had purpose. Even your mistake had meaning, even your collapse carried a lesson, and now you return not as who you were, but as someone deeper, stronger, more equipped for the next level of your purpose. That's how co-creation works. You bring your willingness, you bring your truth, and the divine brings direction. But this is important. Co-creation doesn't work if you're not honest, if you're still blaming others, if you're still hiding your truth. If you're still pretending you're fine, then you're not truly in relationship with God. You're in performance, and you can't build anything real from a performance. Co-creation demands that you show up with your full self, not just the polished version. It asks you to say, here I am with all of it, the mess, the pain, the beauty, the regret. What can we build now? That's when real miracles happen, not miracles that fall from the sky, miracles that are built with your hands and God's guidance. You see, being chosen was never about being perfect. It was about being available to truth, to healing, to growth. And when you become available again, even after a fall, the plan reforms itself, not as a punishment, but as an evolution of what was possible all along. Let's be clear, the path may not look like the original plan. You may have lost some time, some people, some innocence. But if you return to awareness and begin co-creating again, what rises next may be even more powerful, because it is built with wisdom. You are not stuck, you are not broken, you are not too late. You are simply at the point in the journey where co-creation becomes conscious, and now the question is, will you keep waiting for a divine rescue? Or will you start co-writing your redemption with the divine that never stopped believing in you? Because that's what God is waiting for. Not perfection, not performance, just your honest presence and your willingness to help build what only you and God can build together.